Hey, this is Steve Cloward. Welcome to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today, I've got a special guest friend of mine, Mike Young, and he's just incredible at what he does. I'm not going to talk about his story, but if you're struggling with branding and you're just not feeling like you have the authority out in the marketplace, don't know where to go or kind of really what to do to help you, this is the guy, the Makeover Master, Mike Young. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Steve, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Hey, likewise. I appreciate your time and I'm excited. When we met at an event a little while back, after I heard you speak, I just knew with kind of knowing the direction I wanted to go and the business my boys have, what they needed, the help, and the biggest piece that's kind of always been a missing link, frankly, in a lot of my businesses over the last 20 years is really creating that branding and so that you can be, have that authority. And with today's world, online, so much social media, it's hard to, stand out and get attention. And so, I told you that I think the second or third day, it's like, man, I need to talk to you. And so I'm grateful to have you on the show, but also to be working with you and just seeing what you've done already. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate you for sure.
Thanks, man. So tell me, I love your story. We have some similarities, and I think that's really why I resonated as well. I'd love to, have you tell kind of what you've been through and the steps that got you to where you're at doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think I started like a lot of entrepreneurs start. I had that pie in the sky dream. I wanted to work from where I wanted to work, when I wanted to work, with who I wanted to work. Kind of that, and just magically somehow money's going to arrive in my bank account, right?
Right.
And so I had run a mortgage company in the 2000s, and then in 2008. Not only did the mortgage company go under, but my personal finances at the time went under as well. I went from liquid millionaire to $200,000 in debt in less than 6 months. And really, I mean, it knocked me on my ass. That's the easy way to put it is I found myself in a place where I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And it semi blew my mind because I was always told, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, maybe you build your own business, get a big house, get some fancy cars, a wife and 2 kids, and you're going to be happy.
Yep.
And I did all that. And yet I was still, I would say today I was maybe purposeless at the time. And I was miserable. I was working in the office 80 hours a week, grinding it out. The company was starting to fail, and I came home one night and I just looked at my wife. My son was 1 at the time, and I just said, I'm miserable. I don't enjoy what I'm doing, and I don't want to spend the next 18 years of my son's life this way.
Yeah, the money, the house, the wife, the 2 kids, it's all beautiful, but that doesn't give you fulfillment.
Yeah,
That's kind of what you were missing. You lacked your purpose and the fulfillment because I feel you there.
Yeah. And sometimes, purpose and fulfillment, they're just on the other side of a tremendous road of pain and suffering and some adversity, and so I just started, I quit the mortgage company about 6 months before it actually went under. And I had 5 business partners at the time, and they bought me out for $1. And I'm very grateful for them for just I kind of came in one day and just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And
Wow.
so next thing I know, I'm sitting in my home office alone, and I started Googling, like, how do you run an online business, and what was I going to do next? And so I had knowledge, skills, and talents from the process of growing a company from nothing to a couple hundred employees and 10 offices and the mortgage side, but I didn't know what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
And that kind of led into the theme of your podcast, which is it created an addiction. It created an addiction to studying, learning, books, courses, online courses, seminars, events. But what I was really doing was masking the fact and never creating a real business. I was never creating and putting my flag in the ground, so to speak, and saying, this is what I do. This is how I help people. Because the interesting thing about it now is when you do that, it creates a condition for failure. If you say, this is what I'm doing and exactly what I'm working towards, Now you have a binary question at the end of this. Did you do it or did you not do it?
So you mean the difference between kind of stepping in with 1 foot versus declaring and like
Mhm.
staking your claim, right?
I think that's it, man. It felt like, I was digging 1,000 1-foot wells instead of just digging and digging and digging until I hit water. I didn't realize I was doing that at the time. I was wildly addicted to, I must, if things aren't working, I must need something, and it's got to be outside of myself. And I think the
Yeah,
reality that the light bulb moment was when I realized it's actually inside of
right.
yourself. It's an inside out process. But so many people go through that same path, and that's what I'm committed to today is helping others avoid some of those mistakes I made.
I think you just answered the question to what I was looking for and doing. Because, like I said, we have a lot of similarities in what happened after you kind of shifted and after I kind of lost it all and went to prison for 8 of the last 10 years. That's what I've been doing. And I think that's why I resonated, because I knew deep down what I wanted to do, what would make me get that fulfillment, by really helping other people. And I knew when I listened to you and heard you that you were going to be part of the puzzle that I needed to finish off. I had 2 or 3 corners missing. And, so that's what, I mean, honestly, you've allowed me to really be able to declare what I'm doing and going all in. And that's
Yeah.
what I was lacking. So it's
Yeah,
just
it's cool to see like our
huge.
process now is always it's like this, it's a combination of things, but it's I think it has something to do with how we're raised and society pressures and everything else. But you kind of in the beginning are, you're a kid and you're just trying different things. You're learning, you're sticking peanut butter in the VCR. You're just trying stuff, and you're not judging yourself. You're not like, oh, I really screwed that up when you're 2 years old or 3 years old.
Right.
And somewhere along the way, people start telling you how to act and what to think and stand in line and sit down, and you need to be on time and listen to the bell in school, and next thing you know, you become conditioned to having other people tell you how to act in the world. And it's like that process somehow strips us of our true identity. If you're a very creative person and artistic, and maybe you have parents that like they really want you to be an attorney,
Yeah.
and so you're kind of forced into a way of living or being that might not be who you truly are. And so the first part of the process I find is usually just getting people to kind of reclaim that again. It's still down there, it's just been
Yeah.
covered up with layers of crap and conditioning.
Yeah. We hear so often, and I'm guilty of it with my kids when they're younger. Stop. You can't do that. No, and as you look at kids, you know, we might even be daydreaming and things like that. And, like you said, we are dreaming, we are thinking that anything's possible. And then we get that conditioning, like you said, that just kind of strips that away. And
Yeah, and I think, I think that's the process, for your listeners that are, especially, I have several friends that have had felonies on their record. I've had several friends that have had massive addictions to certain things. Mine, I think in looking back, I'm glad I got addicted to what I got addicted to instead of like heroin or meth or something like
sure.
that. But it's still an addiction.
Yeah.
And I think from all the research that I've done on addiction, focusing on the addiction itself and trying to get rid of it doesn't work. It's a replacement technique. You have to replace your focus and your habits and your routines on something that you do want. And there's just simply no time for the addiction to survive in that world. And it's a process, but I think in the beginning, it's like if you've been knocked down and you can't see the forest through the trees and you don't know where to turn, you really just need to kind of take a step back and breathe for a moment and realize, number one, you're still alive.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
number two is the past is the past. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes ago or World War II. You can't change it. And so it's more of a process of getting clear on something you want to work towards, and then just starting to take incremental steps towards that. And in the beginning, it's wildly complex. You're overwhelmed with information, because you haven't gotten clear enough on the underlying meaning and mission that you're working after yet.
Right. I don't know if you went through this, but I really struggled with like my identity and what I was going to do. And I let that, when you speak of the past, I really let my past get in the way of my future. I was literally looking at myself as two halves, like the Steve pre-prison, the Steve post-prison. And that just kept holding me up. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, and I self-sabotage myself. And, until I, got the focus and the purpose and really just started taking one step at a time. I think the thing I experienced that maybe you did is when you've had success, at least the way I went through it, is I forgot the first time around it took some time. And so now I'm starting from ground zero. I've lost it all. I've had a good life. I've been able to have time freedom, enjoy some things. And all of a sudden I expected it to happen tomorrow, And so that's what I think really left me unfocused, thinking that shiny object or this shiny object is going to get me there faster rather than I knew better, but I wasn't allowing myself to see it and just say, hey, I've got to claim what it is I want to do and then just take the steps to do it.
Yeah, and I think I definitely went through that. So there's and millions and millions of other people have gone through it and are going through it. So sometimes it's easy to isolate so much that you think that you're the only one going through this experience. You're driving yourself mad between your ears.
Yeah.
And it's like this process of forgiveness for what's happened and kind of finding your self-worth or self-love again, like just saying it's okay, that was a thing that happened. I think if you look at like I don't know what's a bad example. If you look at let's say airplane pilots, right? They're going to fly across the country. When their tower has them off course, they just say, hey, you're 2 degrees off course, you need to correct to the left. You don't see the pilot saying, hey, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I'm 2% off course or whatever. They don't beat themselves up. They just move the plane back to where they need to be. But we're crazy creatures and we love to beat ourselves up, and so if you can kind of let that stuff go and really, really just sit down and think for a second about, okay, I'm going to rebuild this life. Maybe I've written 40 chapters of my book or 50 chapters of my book, depending on how old you are. There's still so much left that can be done. There's so much good you can do in the world.
Oh yeah.
You kind of have to stop and then admit that whatever's happened and replace your habits, your patterns, your routines, your relationships. A lot of times you have to get all of those things moving to support what you actually want and what you're moving after. But the first step, you got to decide what you're moving after, and everything else is I really believe this. Everything else is some sort of psychological masking technique that deep down, we're just trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect ourselves from death. We're trying to protect ourselves from social judgment. And you're going to continue to make mistakes. You're going to continue to be judged by others. So it's this process of learning to stand on your own 2 feet again, where you're so passionate about what you're working towards that all these little comments or these mistakes that you might make, they just don't throw you off your game for very long.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like that stuff. And then just the mindset of just realizing that, failure is part of success, and once I started just own that and accept it, and then surround myself with the right people as well, because I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm terrible at. And I know that I have to be around people that are better than me. It's like I used to play a lot of golf. And when my handicap got into the single digits, it's because I was playing with guys better than me, because it kept that focus so much, more focused during a round than when I'm playing with guys that were just out having fun, but they're hitting crappy shots or not keeping score. And then, I just lose focus. So I don't care. And And
Yeah, and I think it's not even that they're better than you. They're at a different stage. They have different
that's a good
talents. They
word.
have
Yeah.
different, like you ever get around your buddies and you're like way better at something than they are, and they're way better at something else than you are, and it's like this comparison game's a trap. It's
I
like,
love that you point that out because language is powerful and that isn't the right word. Like you said, yeah,
yeah.
they're just
Well,
playing more. They've been doing it longer.
it is exactly like the game of golf. The golf course is stagnant. The ball is just sitting there on a tee. You may, even if you're in a tournament and there's other players, the game is still with yourself.
Right.
It's and running, long distance running, those types of activities, those things are all like, that's why people say in track and field, they always talk about their personal best or their personal
Yeah.
record. It's because the game isn't against the competition. It's a game with yourself.
Yeah. And I think no matter what you're doing, even in a team sport, you still have to do your job, your part. So you've got to focus on what you can do and control.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
I sat around waiting too long, not waiting too long because it would never happen for
Mm.
somebody to save me in a sense. I'm going to hire the right person that's going to just take my call floor that I had, and that's going to just take off, But no, you just have to own it and take control yourself. And then, surround yourself with the right people. Because that was like you had said earlier, I kind of isolated and, that's a big piece of just kept me stuck too. If I'm not
Yeah.
going to be around people that are like-minded or, trying to accomplish certain things, then, I'm going to just stay stuck. And that's what I did.
And that's all very, like, it's all super normal too. You're isolating because you don't want to be judged. You don't
Yep.
feel, maybe you don't feel where you want to be yet, or maybe you haven't figured out how to go from, I had an addiction or I had a felony or whatever, and how to transition to that next stage, not only in your mindset, but a lot of times your habits, your routines, your patterns, your relationships. It's very difficult because, like, if you say I'm going to learn to ride a bike and you're a young kid, I mean, there's just so many moving parts and it takes you a few days to kind of figure it out. And then when you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
And I think the underlying thing, if you ever study like Jean Piaget or anything like that in psychology, this whole thing's just a big game. It's a game with yourself, working towards a valued goal. And what you need to fall in love with, well, you don't need to fall in love with anything. Everybody's
Right.
path is their own. But what I've learned over time to fall in love with is the process. Is I pick something I'm going to work towards. There's going to be obstacles and adversity that I don't see coming. There's going to be information that I don't understand or don't know yet even exists. And your brain has to take all that in and say, okay, well, this is what I think is the first most appropriate next step. And then as you take that step, the playing field changes. It's dynamic. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you take a step and new obstacles or new information come your way. But then once you solve it, you're past it. And then you can take that information and incorporate that knowledge and those tools into become a better version of yourself or become a better version of your business. But that's the process that never stops. You're always
Yeah.
going to seek out something you don't know, have to learn it and incorporate it, and then move past it. And then you're going to continue that process over and over again. So it's very similar to what you said. It's not necessarily that failure is part of the process, but it is in a way. I just wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't define it as failure. There's going to be things that I try that I think are the right move, and sometimes it's not going to
It'll
work.
work. Yep.
And then you have a choice. Do I go around it? Do I go over it? Do I go through it? Or did I run into an immovable obstacle that's clearly showing I need to course correct and move my path?
I love that.
And it's hard to fall in love with that process, because there is, like baseball, you're striking out 70, 80, 90% of the time. That's the reality.
Yep.
So it's hard to fall in love with something that you're failing that much at,
It's so true.
Yeah.
I think it was what you said there was critical. I think it was John Maxwell that says, there is no finish line.
Mm.
We're always just staying in the process. I know I'd got caught up in that at times thinking, oh, if I get to here, then I'll be happy or whatever. No,
Mm.
like you said, that is an inside job, period. And just it's like if I have a vacation for 3 months out, looking forward to it is almost just as fun or as good as the trip. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It just seems like, but because once you get there, then it's over. Then what? And so just enjoy the process.
You nailed it on the
Keep
head right
going.
there.
Yeah.
Our brains can't really tell the difference between some of those things. Like I see people all the time, they're like, hey, I'm gonna write a book, I'm gonna start a podcast, I'm gonna do this. But your brain actually, as soon as you announce that to the world, or I'm gonna go on a vacation, your brain automatically incorporates that, gives you the dopamine hits, that good feelings that you're
Hmm.
working towards something. But then you accomplish the thing you're working towards, and there's this huge emotional letdown.
Yep.
And so that's actually what people are seeking. They're seeking a valued goal that they're working towards. And if you remove that and you accomplish the thing, like I worked towards having my first event for almost a year, had my event, huge emotional letdown. I got super depressed the next week.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out why, because I hadn't done enough studying and maybe neuroscience work or psychology work yet, but I couldn't figure out why. I just crashed. But it was because I didn't know what my next valued thing I was working towards was. And I felt lost. I felt confused. I felt isolated. And so you kind of have to pause at that moment and just pick the next thing.
Yeah. You hear that happen a lot with athletes. They win the
Mm,
Super Bowl or they win
yeah.
something, and they do that. Well, awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about, your business and what you do exactly, and, how you can help people.
Sure. I essentially work with entrepreneurs and small business owners that have something that they're passionate about. They have something to say or something to sell, but they're frustrated because they can't figure out how to sell more of it. Um, and and I have a little unique process that I go through, but it is kind of that combination of it really comes down to clarity. It's like, how do we get clear enough on what we're working towards? And most of the industry, they lead with tools and tactics. They lead with, this software is the quick easy fix, the hack, whatever you want to get more eyeballs on your business. The problem is, if you get more eyeballs on your business and you're not, maybe with a personal brand, you're not emotionally stable enough, or maybe with your products you're not clear enough, or your systems aren't built enough, you actually make the problem worse. And so it's this combination of making sure that everything's in alignment with the actual entrepreneur, making sure that we have a sense of self-worth, and then controlling their business image online so that you can actually dominate the playing field for your new prospects. So when somebody runs into you for the very first time, they have the mindset of, this person clearly has their act together and they're very, very good at what they do. So that gives them permission to take the first step. And that process can be very, very complex unless you chunk it down to, like, step one, we got to do this, step two, we got to do this. And that's what I help business owners do.
And that includes everything from helping with the logo and the right coloring, from a psychological standpoint, to
Yeah.
websites, to, some of the messaging, and
Well,
everything.
it's kind of leads back into one comment you made earlier. If you've gotten knocked on your butt and you kind of are in that moment where everything feels chaotic and you don't know what to do, I think you hear people talk about their why, right? You got to get
Yeah.
clear on your why. Well, I think you need probably multiple whys. Why is a really good question. It's also annoying and it's also frustrating.
Yeah.
Kind of like a little kid coming up to you going, well, why do you believe that? Why do you believe this? And next thing you know, your kid's asking you, well, what's FM and AM stand for?
Yeah.
And then you realize you went through your whole life and you don't know what FM and AM stands for. You just were conditioned, right? So the why question, I find if I can attach a very deep, meaningful, like personal why, like mine had to do with my kids. It was like, if I stop working on something that I find meaningful that I'm going after to have a successful business or whatever it is,
Mhm.
if I stop, then it shows my kids what it looks like to quit. It shows my kids what it looks like to settle. So that was so internally powerful to me that it got me through all the dark times. But then I have a business why, it's to eliminate unnecessary suffering and expense for business owners, right? So it's like, it doesn't have to take 8.5 years and a couple $100,000. You can do it much faster and more efficiently if you just surround yourself with the right people. And
Yeah.
in my business why, I know that if you don't stop the suffering and the expense, it leads to depression. It leads to relationship issues. It leads to issues with how they parent their children. It leads to suicide. And so every morning I don't have a problem getting up out of bed, because I know that, like this conversation today, you never know where these little ripples are going to
Yeah.
lead. So somebody might listen to this, get inspired. Somebody might get on a plane, go to an event in Iowa, and next thing you know, you meet 2 or 3 of the right people and things click. And so
Bingo.
I don't have a problem showing up. I don't have a problem working, because my underlying whys of why I'm doing certain things are very personal to me.
That's powerful. Yeah. And, I can say from experience, you take incredible amount of pride in doing a hell of a job. I mean, you don't cut corners, you don't settle for just average. I mean, you do a hell of a job. So,
Well, I think it's from my personal experience, honestly.
right.
Like what was happening was I'd find a tool or a tactic that worked, but it was almost like I was putting sticks up on the house without setting the foundation properly.
Yeah.
So I was beating myself in between my ears. The story was, you suck, you lost $1 million in 6 months, you're a loser, you can't even support your family, like that was my internal dialogue. So unless you kind of sort that out first, the business could have been doing very, very well. It still would have crumbled all on top of itself, because underneath, I didn't feel good about myself. I didn't have self-love, self-worth, anything else. So I would purposely find things and ways to sabotage it. And what it was is like there's like that old religious thing where, I don't even know what religion this is, but they literally take like a whip with some metal on it and they slap their own back. It's like this forced suffering that they do to themselves.
Oh yeah.
But that's what it was I felt underneath it all that losing the business, or you could say felony, or you could say addiction, insert whatever your story is, that was my fault. And the reason it was my fault was because, I take responsibility for it, almost over conscientious there, but that was affecting my relationships. That was affecting my business. That was all those things are my fault. So clearly I must suffer more for this, because I'm screwing up not only my life, but the people I surround myself with. So for whatever reason, I was subconsciously always sabotaging myself, literally saying, like, people would come to me and say, hey, can I give you a couple $1,000s to help me do this? And I'd be like, no, it's not the right fit. Well, and all I did, it's like the movie with Jim Carrey, Yes Man. That was literally it. I just started saying yes to everything instead of no. That was the shift.
Wow.
So,
Well,
I didn't really want to travel during COVID and some other stuff and whatever. And Nate, our friend Nate Bailey, he's like, would you come speak at my event? And my answer was instantly yes, because I knew that there was going to be somebody in that room that maybe had some frustration, some suffering, some, whatever going on that I could help. And so it was worth it to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, one of the big keys is, from what you went through, what I've been through, it doesn't matter how bad we've been knocked down, how bad, our life's been, it really comes down to doing kind of that inside stuff to really, like you said, I had to forgive myself. I had to, own everything. I don't know if you've read it. I imagine probably the book Extreme Ownership, that really hit me hard because, I was still sitting in a victim stance for quite a while. And until I own stuff, that's really what started the change. And then for me starting to realize, okay, well, a lot of it's just right here. So I started to work on that. And then slowly things turned around. And then I started attending, events with people that I would actually engage with and, not just kind of be there to go through the motions, because that's not that valuable. Yeah, you learn some things, but the value is in, other people in relationships. At least my business experience, that's what I can look back on and say, just the network and the people I knew, really, whether they helped, because you hired them for something they're good at, or just being in the network and, and making you feel like you're, moving forward. It all played into just slowly taking that confidence and turning it around for me.
And that's why, like, you've seen this in dogs and stuff. At their final days, they wanna isolate. They want to go lay in a field somewhere and die. Human beings are similar. When things become overly complex or overwhelming, we isolate, and we're trying to protect our instinct to just stay alive. But it's a trap, because all business comes through people. All
Yeah.
money comes from other people's bank accounts into yours for an exchange in value. And so as soon as you isolate, you're cutting yourself off at the knees, so to speak.
Yep.
And it's difficult. I mean, I've been there, and it's the last thing you want to do, but it's like all of the magic happens directly behind the thing that you least want to deal with, and the
Yeah.
thing that you least want to face. It's we've all had this. You've ever had a conversation that's nagging at you that you have to have with a family member, or a business person that you're in business relations with, and you're just avoiding it, and then you have the conversation, and like it feels like that weight's lifted off
Yep.
your shoulders. It's the same process. You just have to face it, deal with it, because the gold is directly on the other side of that thing.
Yep. That's so true. Well, man, I appreciate your time, Mike. Where can people find you at? Check you
My
out.
website, I'm on social media. They can find me at themakeovermaster.com. If you've got somebody that's looking to go down the entrepreneurial road and don't know where to start, I've got a ton of free resources on my website and places they can begin, and I'm glad to help.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time, and I'll put all that information in the show notes. So the makeovermaster.com. Mike is, phenomenal individual. He understands things on levels, because he's been through the path that he's taken has really helped him get to a place where he's an absolute expert at what he does. So thanks again, Mike, and wish you Merry Christmas, and we'll be in touch soon.
Steve, same to you, man.
Hey man, take it easy.